Minister for Climate Change, Local Government, Energy and Revenue. Grew up in the Waikato, all good people do, where his family were farmers and orchardists. Studied accounting and finance at Waikato University, worked in investment banking in Asia, Europe and the United Kingdom, with several management roles during and after. In the aftermath of the global financial crisis, also completed a health sciences degree at Auckland University of Technology. I say that because everyone who becomes a minister has a very long background before they do. He was elected as a Member of Parliament for the North Shore in 2020. He's now the Minister of Climate Change, the Minister for Energy, the Minister of Local Government and the Minister of Revenue. We welcome to the stage Minister Simon Watts. Kia ora, Simon.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. Hey, well, tēnā koutou katoa, and look, a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be back in Rotorua, and it is great to be here at your conference. What an absolutely awesome panel we just had leading into this conversation. I was lucky to be able to hear at least 15 minutes of that, and I think some of the thematics coming out of that, this isn't on my speech, but I'm just playing back what I was hearing, is that long-term sustainable change and the practical and pragmatic approach. And I think that's really, really important to hear being played back. The champions and role models that were sitting on this stage, we should be very proud of them. They are the ones leading the action at the coalface, and while government and local government and those are there as well, these guys are on the ground, they're doing the work, and I big ups to them and acknowledge that. And Sarah, I couldn't not mention you. Congratulations on being the recipient of the Young Stormwater Person of the Year last evening. Congratulations, that's a great honour, and I'll add it to all your other honours by the sound of the popularity that's in the room, but well done to you. So let's get back to the speech, because I want to give you a little bit of an update in terms of where we are. Firstly, just acknowledge Gillian Blythe, who is in the room, the Water New Zealand Chief Executive. We've also got Tim Gibson, President here, and also acknowledge mana whenua and local iwi, Ngāti Whakarui, for here, their contribution and their work, and I think we heard a little bit of that on the stage in terms of the importance of us all working together. It's great to be part of an event that is focused on a resilient and sustainable future for our communities. Like other countries we know, New Zealand is dealing with the impacts of climate change and severe weather impacts. And the stormwater aspect and responsibilities that you have as part of your industry are pretty much front and centre in terms of the challenge that we are facing in that regard. As our urban areas grow, councils are going to need to shift their focus toward mitigating and planning for the challenges of increasing rainfall and storms. And under the Local Water Done Well policy that we're doing, we're providing councils with a financially sustainable options for new water service delivery models, allowing them to meet those challenges. The reality is that every circumstance in every part of New Zealand is different and unique, and that is the beauty of our beautiful country. But the context is we do have a significant challenge in front of us, and we are going to, and I think to the point that was raised on the panel, we are and must work together in order to deal with that underpinning challenge. Because if we don't, then the point on the stage of, I'm not going to be around to see some of this, we're not going to make that forward step. And I think as also as noted, we are doing this for those that are going to follow us. So we've got to make and take that action. And as Government Minister, I am one seat around that team. I'm one position on that team. But I definitely am aware of my responsibilities and accountabilities to make sure that I am playing my part alongside everyone else there. We've made some significant progress on Local Water Done Well. It is obviously the third and final bill of that is currently in front of Select Committee. Just acknowledge the input that we've had from many in the room on making that legislation better, and that's really, really appreciated. And we know that councils are pretty much in the thick of developing their plans for future delivery of water services. I'm also acutely aware that we need to see that activity hitting the ground and contracts being signed for infrastructure and actually the money getting out of the door from councils, not just doing a whole lot of planning, but money getting out the door to contractors who are doing the work. And I am hearing feedback that there's, that needs to step up, and I'm conscious of that, and, conversations that I'm having, including with the Chair and the CEO of Watercare last evening, is that activity needs to pick up. And we need to get away from a lot of talking and start doing a bit of doing. That's my message to councils out there. You've got the tools, you've got the plans, get on and start doing the doing, because we cannot get yesterday back, right? We've got to use every day to the maximum of our ability. So look, in regards to the local water done well, the policy area, where we're currently aiming for by September of this year to have all of the entities in place. I pretty much have a weekly update in terms of where all the councils are at around that. They're making some pretty good progress, particularly in this region, including the broader Waikato. Some really good progress and leadership in terms of getting that stuff in play. You're going to see those structures set up and announced no later than September the 3rd. I've made it pretty clear that there is no exemptions to that timetable. You miss it, you're in a bit of trouble, and we're working through. But I've only got a few councils that are sort of on my watch list, and I'm working constructively with them. It is my duty to work with local government to support them to make sure they're in the best place possible. But those structures will be in play this year, and then we really need to get that activity cranking as much as we can to support the industry, because we're going to need to ramp this work up. And for those of you in the sector, if the work's not here, then the work's somewhere else in Southeast Asia. And our bright and young people, as we heard, we need to retain them, because, we need them in terms of the pipeline of infrastructure and improvement we need going forward. I think in terms of stormwater arrangements, we know that councils, and we have set it up deliberately, that they have flexibility to deal with the uniqueness of their own circumstances. I think that's important. It isn't a one-size-fits-all. Stormwater in the context of different parts of New Zealand has different unique considerations, both technically but also in terms of the more broader mechanism of how it's operating. I think the point around in terms of stormwater being transferred, whether it stays in council or goes to the new entity, again is a decision point for councils and communities, and I know a lot of that is being consulted with their community at the point. And there will be different models, but from our point of view, as long as the way in which those activities are delivered is financially sustainable over the long term, then that decision will lie with communities and councils. Obviously, there's a key element in terms of coordination that's required between wastewater and stormwater and drinking water. It's all linked. It's all part of the same system. It's all part of the same why, and so the consideration around that is also front of mind. But I think when we get the legislation in play, that will enable the planning and regulatory tools, including stormwater network management plans and service agreements that support councils to maintain those networks, which is critically important. I also want to briefly just touch on a couple of things that come up in my discussions with mayors quite regularly in regards to stormwater and also the more broader water reforms. One's around price harmonisation, and the other one is around the impacts of those joint arrangements on the ownership and the control of those assets. They're the two issues that come up quite a bit and are common across a number of councils. I think the reality is that there is concern of when you join up with other councils, other areas, then one council may be subsidising or doing that to someone else, and there's a bit of tension in that. But the context is that when we stand back and say what do we need to do in the context of the broader reform program, small subscale councils that don't have size and capability and technical expertise in that are going to find it really hard to be able to deal with this challenge on a sustainable and enduring basis. And again, if I go back to that point, I think, Nicole, you mentioned long-term sustainable change. I think that was what you said. That's exactly what we're talking about. We've got to have this built into the model. So that's very much front and centre in terms of how councils are thinking about that harmonisation. I think the other point is that price harmonisation isn't mandatory. So it is absolutely possible that in different council regions, within a grouping, you may have different pricing. And that's also acknowledging that not everyone starts at the same starting point, nor have the same requirements as well. I think the other point around ownership is that we want the ownership of these assets. We heard on the stage, this is, I think the quote that was raised is, we are part of the land. The land's not part of ours. And so, the ownership of sort of thinking that we don't own it. We've got to be custodians in the context of this challenge, and therefore, we don't want Wellington sort of being responsible for this. We want our local communities and local people, and they're the ones that we should have leading this, supported by central government. I think that's the model which I think is more enduring in the context of decades from now going forward. So that's there. Again, we're not directing that ownership at all. It's a decision for local communities as well. Finally, I want to provide an update on where we're at with the legislation and the next steps. So the Local Water Done Well bill is, as I said, currently in front of Select Committee, and it'll be reported back to Parliament next month. Okay, so we're not mucking around. We're driving a pace. People want to see stuff happening, and that's fair enough, right? There is I want it now, and we need it now because we saw the impacts of the Falkland floods or what happened in Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti. We see what's happening, we need this stuff moving. So it's reporting back to Parliament next month. I've already discussed some of the key changes the bill proposes regarding new arrangements and improvements to stormwater management. So they've been reflected from the feedback that we've had from you as part of that bill. We're also going to make several other changes to support the performance of the stormwater network, particularly around providing greater clarity around the planning and regulation and tools that enable risk-based management. And I think that was something that we heard loud and clear from feedback. And the bill's also going to provide for wastewater and stormwater environmental performance standards to enable the efficient delivery of those water infrastructure standards, because the environmental aspects are critical, and I know it is a big aspect of feedback that we heard in terms of making sure that those environmental performance standards are set at the appropriate level to manage the broader risks that we are facing. So some of those changes are also coming in. Regional councils remain the regulators for wastewater and stormwater networks, and they are responsible for the resource consent process, as well as the monitoring, reporting, compliance and enforcement. And again, seeing some of those examples of how we've got some of the community organisations, NGOs, working together in collaboration with those entities, that's great, and we want to encourage that as well. National wastewater and stormwater environmental performance standards will improve the consistency and provide operators with greater certainty. What I've heard loud and clear from the sector is, for God's sake, just give us some certainty around what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, right? Okay, I hear you, I get that, I know how important certainty is in terms of decision making, whether you're going to hire more people or invest in some new infrastructure, and the lack of certainty is a major driver of pressure, anxiety, stress, everything, right? I get that, and everything we're trying to do is at least give clarity of what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. So that's very much embedded in there. The Water Services Authority also recently sought feedback on the proposed wastewater standards and are aiming to have the first set of standards in place shortly after the bill's enacted. And the stormwater environmental performance standards are expected to be developed at a later stage, but it is something that we're absolutely wanting to get moved through. So I guess suffice to say on that, the bill covers a lot of details, and following the enactment of the bill, the Department of Internal Affairs will act and update its guidance for councils, including aspects such as the aspects around stormwater. And I expect that to happen in the second half of this year, which actually, looking at my clock's not too far away, right? We've only got 4 quarters before we're back, out there campaigning for our jobs. So, this is, the 3 years doesn't go long, and the intensity is up. Other key upcoming milestones just to be aware of is that, as I said, councils will submit their water services delivery plans by the 3rd of September of this year. And I'm keen to maintain that momentum, and the department will be ready to review any of those plans earlier. So as soon as councils are ready, and I know a few are going to be submitting those pretty much in the next 8 weeks, as soon as they're reviewed, we're going to get them out, approve them, and regulators looking at them and get on with it. So we're not going to muck around on that front. I also look forward to sharing further updates as we continue to make progress in terms of improving broader water infrastructure. I just want to again acknowledge all of you in the room for the contribution that you all make day in, day out in regards to what is a critically important aspect of our infrastructure environment. I want to also acknowledge those from particularly in the local government space, as Minister for Local Government, for the work and contribution that you make day in, day out. It is hugely appreciated, and the role in which you play to represent your communities and the work and the mahi you do on the ground at the coalface does make a difference. With that, happy to take any questions, and yeah, we'll go into that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Round of applause for Simon. We have got time for questions. So, standard protocols. Throw your hand up. I'll come to you. Name, affiliation, short question, answer. Who's going to start? It's like an auction. Oh, there we go. Gillian.
Kia ora. I said to you when we were outside that you have two portfolios that effectively collide: the local water space, local government water space, and the climate change. You know, because climate change is where it comes to roost in the water environment. Keen to understand how we can make sure that the Climate Change Commission, Ministry for the Environment, and all of the people who are advising you are getting a real appreciation of how water is impacted by climate change.
Yeah, a massive area of focus, and I think also with my climate change hat, my energy hat, there's a huge amount of synergies across those, in effect, silo portfolios. But the context around adaptation is one that is very much a priority for this government. I think it's a priority for all political parties, and that's why we've got bipartisan support around a national climate adaptation framework that we put into legislation this year. I'll be taking Cabinet through that design of that legislation, which has been based on the feedback from the Select Committee, which again was bipartisan in nature. I'm working with members of the opposition around that. That is really, really important. Take the politics away. We need a clear framework around who pays, how do you share costs, how do you make sure the information and data is available for New Zealanders to make a decision around where they build and where they live, and also just consider the spectrum of options from managed retreat to prevention, acknowledging there is a range. That's the work underway. That is something that is really, really important for us as a country in the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And this framework that we're putting in place will be in legislation this year, and that will be the first step. This is crawl, walk, run, all right? We've got to make a step forward, and the status quo is not tolerable. So that's what we're doing on that front. And that's being fed in by local government, banks and insurers, iwi Māori. We've got all of those people around that table in terms of the design of that legislation as well.
Further questions? Hands up. Who's got one? You have. I know it. Some of you have got it, Sarah, on the tip of your tongue. You know you want to ask it. Going to have time, I suspect, for another one, so I want some more hands. Damien.
Hi, Damien from Zealandia Consulting. Nice to see you, Simon.
Yeah.
If you had another 3 years coming, then what would you do?
Well, we're going to have to ensure that the execution of local water done well actually happens. The point I raised about activity is what we need. We need those plans in terms of these structures to actually be resulting in more pipes in the ground and more infrastructure being built and maintained and replaced. And I think it is fair to say that there's been a bit of a lag because of the lack of clarity around the broader policy position. And that work needs to be done critically at a pace that is faster than what we've seen in the last 5 years. So the faster we get those structures in place, which is really the driver, then we move into business as usual, and then we actually start doing the doing. And I think that's we've already got Watercare doing the doing. They've got an earlier trajectory, so they were up and running a couple of months ago. We've put some economic regulation around Wellington Water to give them more belts and braces around that. But the feedback I'm getting from councils and regions across the country, their communities are telling them they want to get on and do the doing. And so for me, the next 3 years is bringing this to life and making step forward again to what the panel was saying. We've got to be taking steps forward in terms of improving our broader infrastructure environment, which has environmental, social, cultural, and economic benefits. And so that's what our communities are wanting us to do. And so we just need to get on and do the doing.
Great. Question here with John.
Minister John Cunliffe from Alba District. I guess my question is around, the progress that you're making at central level in terms of integrating sort of some, I guess you could call them, I think you referred to them as siloed inputs, where you're talking energy, you're talking climate change, and talking local government water stuff. So do you see these siloed sort of structures and processes impeding the sort of progress that you're looking, or you're telling us is important? And if you do see some impeding work there, do you have any mechanisms to break that down?
Yeah, look, I'm not speaking out of school to say that, you know, central government has got a number of silos, and sometimes those silos historically don't talk to each other. Though we all know that, particularly in the context of the topic that we're talking about, it's all part of the same system, right? It doesn't matter what bucket or silo you sit in. The aspects around water are across every part of our life and every part of our economy. So quite quickly, you identify that there is an opportunity of us to be able to work together. Obviously, the Prime Minister giving ministers, portfolios and ministerial responsibilities across different areas which have synergies, such as energy, local government and climate, is a really, makes a difference, because then I have the power to be able to bring together 3 agencies to execute upon the same goal. We've also got a number of joint ministerial groups. One of them is our infrastructure group, and we meet last night, for example, and it's Minister Bishop, Minister Willis, who's Finance Minister, myself, Minister Jones, and Minister Brown. So we've got health, we've got all of the portfolios talking about single issues, and we're bringing the different perspectives around the table to that single issue. And I think that's sort of common sense in the private sector, with respect. It's sort of like what happens normally outside of the beltway of Wellington, but we're definitely driving that in as an agenda to try and get, basically faster delivery and more joined up thinking. And also, that's just a natural way that I think about, we've got to take a more of a systems approach to the challenges that we have in front of us.
I guess as a follow-up, have we ever thought about a Minister of Water?
Well, I think there's been a little bit of commentary in the media about having less ministers versus more ministers recently. Look, the reality is that I think we've got plenty of ministers. We've just got to make sure that we do the doing and have a clear and coherent policy agenda that everyone knows where we're going and the role in which they play. Local Water Done Well is the mechanism in order to do that. And my job is to ensure that, I'm working constructively with the sector and with local government. We're all paddling in the same direction. We know that where that destination is, and we're all playing our respective parts to get us there in the most efficient manner. That's my job, and that's the job of everyone else in that. And sometimes I catch the water in the waka, and I haven't lost the paddle yet, which is good. But we want to get that thing moving, right? Because again, this is about pace, and as a country, when you think about the pillars of which our country is built upon, that we should absolutely have the expectation. Again, the panel mentioned it. We should have healthy water. We should have swimmable rivers. We should be able to have, a clean environment. Those are absolutely core things that is all of us, I think, we want to know that we can improve from the status quo. And I think if we're all lined up in the same direction, you in the room, central government, we're all heading the same direction, we've got clarity of what that looks like, then we can do it. And it's only on us if we don't. So I think that's the challenge in front of us.
An excellent way to finish. What about a round of applause for Minister Simon Watts?